My name is Barnaby, and until 6 months ago I was a reasonably happy man. I'm 44 and worked as a landscape architect in Atlanta. My life with my wife, Orlia, seemed perfect. We'd been married for 15 years, had a lovely home in the suburbs and two golden retrievers, Gus and Macy, who were the center of Orlia's world, if not quite mine. I wouldn't say our marriage was passionate, but it was comfortable, familiar, and built on what I thought was a solid foundation of mutual respect and affection. Orlia worked as a marketing manager for a large corporation downtown. She was ambitious, driven, and always impeccably dressed. I admired her success, even though her long hours sometimes meant we didn't see as much of each other as I would have liked. But that's just modern life, isn't it? We were both busy, but we always made time for dinner together, weekends away, and the occasional movie night. Or so I thought. The first crack in my idyllic world appeared subtly. Orlia started staying late at the office more often. She'd come home exhausted, claiming a major project was demanding all her attention. I didn't think much of it at first. I knew her job could be stressful and I trusted her implicitly. Then came the phone calls. Late-night calls that she'd take in another room, her voice hushed and secretive. When I asked who it was, she'd brush it off as a colleague or a client. Again, I didn't suspect anything concrete, but a nagging unease began to creep into my mind. The real turning point was the business trip to Miami. Orlia was supposed to be gone for 3 days. I missed her, of course, but I kept myself busy with work and household chores. On the second night, I decided to surprise her with a call. I hadn't told her I was going to, wanting to catch her off guard and just say hello. She didn't answer. I tried again an hour later, still no answer. I figured she was probably out to dinner with colleagues or maybe had just gone to bed early, but something felt wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Driven by a growing sense of dread, I did something I never thought I was capable of. I logged into our shared email account. I know. It was a violation of her privacy, a betrayal of the trust we had built over years. But I had to know. I had to find out what was going on. What I found shattered my world into a million pieces. A series of emails between Orlia and a man named Silas. Silas was one of her colleagues, apparently. But the emails were anything but professional. They were filled with declarations of love, explicit descriptions of their intimate encounters, and plans for a future together. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The room started spinning and I had to sit down to keep from falling. My wife, the woman I had loved and trusted for 15 years, was having an affair, and not just a casual fling. This was a deep emotional connection. They were talking about leaving their spouses, starting a new life together. I spent the rest of the night in a daze. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. The emails replayed in my mind, each word a dagger twisting in my heart. How could she do this to me? How could she betray me so completely? When Orlia returned from Miami, I acted as if nothing had happened. I greeted her with a hug and a kiss, asked about her trip, and listened attentively as she recounted the details of her meetings. All the while I was seething inside, struggling to contain the rage and hurt that were consuming me. I knew I couldn't keep up the charade forever. I needed to confront her, to demand an explanation. But I also needed to gather my thoughts, to prepare myself for the inevitable confrontation. So I waited, biding my time, plotting my next move. The following weekend, I suggested a romantic dinner at our favorite restaurant. Orlia seemed pleased, oblivious to the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. We made small talk during the drive, discussing work, the dogs, and the upcoming holidays. She seemed perfectly normal, perfectly happy. It was sickening. At the restaurant, we ordered our usual drinks and appetizers. I forced myself to smile, to engage in the conversation, while my mind raced with questions and accusations. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I took a deep breath and said, "Orlia, we need to talk." Her smile faltered slightly. "About what, darling?" she asked, her voice a little too sweet, a little too innocent. "About Silas," I said, watching her face carefully. Her eyes widened and her complexion paled. "Silas? What about Silas?" she stammered. "Don't play coy with me, Orlia," I said, my voice hardening. "I know about the emails, I know about the affair." For a moment she was silent, her face a mask of shock and fear. Then she burst into tears. "Barnaby, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You didn't mean for it to go this far, I repeated, incredulous. You were planning a future with this man. You were talking about leaving me. I know, she cried. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. Please, Barnaby, can you ever forgive me? I stared at her, my heart aching with a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief. Forgive you, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I can, Orlai, I just don't know. That night, Orlai moved into the guest room. We barely spoke for days. I was a zombie, going through the motions of my daily life while my mind was consumed by the betrayal. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything. My world had been turned upside down, and I didn't know how to put it back together. I consulted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Willow. She advised me to gather evidence of the affair, to protect my assets, and to prepare for a long and messy divorce. Her words were cold and clinical, but they were also necessary. I had to be practical to think about my future. As I began to investigate Silas, I discovered that he wasn't just a cheating colleague. He was also a con artist, a manipulator who had a history of preying on vulnerable women. He had seduced several other women at Orlia's company, promising them the world, and then leaving them in financial and emotional ruin. I confronted Orlia with this information, hoping that it would finally open her eyes to the kind of man she had been involved with. But she refused to believe me. She was convinced that Silas loved her, that he was different from the other women he had used and discarded. It was then that I realized that Orlia was not just a victim of Silas's charm. She was also complicit in her own destruction. She had chosen to ignore the red flags, to believe his lies, to betray her marriage and her family. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I gathered all the evidence I had on Silas, including his emails, his financial records, and the testimonies of his other victims. I then contacted the authorities and presented them with my findings. Silas was arrested and charged with fraud, embezzlement, and several other crimes. His reputation was ruined, his career was over, and he was facing a long prison sentence. Orlia was devastated. She had lost her lover, her job, and her reputation. She begged me to forgive her, to take her back, but I couldn't. The trust was gone, the love was gone, and the damage was irreparable. We divorced a few months later. The process was painful and expensive, but it was also necessary. I needed to move on, to rebuild my life, to find happiness again. In the aftermath of the divorce, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I was free from the lies, the deceit, and the betrayal. I was finally able to be myself, to pursue my own interests, to create a life that was authentic and fulfilling. I started traveling, exploring new places, and meeting new people. I reconnected with old friends, took up new hobbies, and rediscovered my passion for landscape architecture. I even started dating again, cautiously and tentatively, but with a renewed sense of hope. One day, while working on a project in Savannah, I met a woman named Juniper. Juniper was a talented artist with a warm heart and a gentle spirit. She was everything that Orlia wasn't: honest, genuine, and compassionate. We fell in love quickly and deeply. Juniper helped me heal from the wounds of the past, to trust again, to believe in love again. We got married a year later, in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by our closest friends and family. Looking back on my experience with Orlia, I realized that it was a painful but ultimately necessary chapter in my life. It taught me valuable lessons about trust, forgiveness, and the importance of self-love. It also showed me that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for a brighter future. I don't hate Orlia, I pity her. She made a terrible mistake, and she is now living with the consequences. I hope that one day she will find peace and happiness. But for now, I am focused on my own life, my own happiness, and my own future. With Juniper by my side, I know that anything is possible.